Guys, I'm so excited for today's video. We're finally going to get started with the sewing. So today I'm going to show you how to sew straight, around circles, around corners, and then we're going to do a really fun project, which is to make a pot plant holder. I'm so excited. Let's get going. Okay guys, so to begin sewing, and if you've never sewn before, this is the perfect video to watch. So what I've done is I've printed out lines off the computer, which will be attached to the subject notes in the description. If you have a printer, you can just print them out, or you can just draw lines on a piece of paper. So I'm going to pretend this is my fabric to start. I'm going to place it between my sewing foot, as you can see here, and I'm going to lower my foot. The aim here is to sew in a perfectly straight line. On your machine, you should have a plus and minus button, which should move your needle either to the left or the right. I'm then going to lower my needle to start. I have placed it directly in the middle of the line. I'm then going to continue sewing, and then I'm going to back tack, which means I'm going backwards. Why am I back tacking? This creates enforcement on the stitches. You always back tack at the beginning and the end of your stitch row. And now I'm going to continue going straight. This might take a few attempts for you to get 100% right, but it's a really good practice to do it like this. I've reached the end of my row. I'm going to back tack again because I finished. And using the cutter tool here, I'm going to stick my thread, lift my foot and remove, and check that I have sewn 100% straight. I suggest doing 4 or 5 of these pages. It's really good practice. It's hard to sew straight when you are beginning, and then you can just get a feel for your machine, how to back tack, and then we can move on to sewing circles. Okay guys, for the next exercise, we're going to do circles. So I'm going to start on the outer circle and work my way in. This is a little bit more challenging than the straight lines. I'm going to lower my foot and make sure that my sewing foot is right between the circle line. I'm then going to move my needle so that I make sure that it's on the black line and lower it. Perfect. And then I'm going to begin sewing. Just adjusting to make it slow. So when you're sewing a circle, you never lift your needle. You always work with your foot. As you can see, I'm moving the paper, which is my pretend fabric, and slowly moving the foot around so that I get a perfectly straight, neat circle. This is a really good practice tool for if you're sewing corners, or anything that's round. So I just keep going like that all the way. And guys, when I started this, I was literally the worst sewer in my class. I was always behind. I never knew what I was doing. So if you feel like you're falling behind or you're battling, you can always post me a comment or ask me any questions, and I'll try to help you as best as I can. Because don't forget, I'm also still a beginner, or I'm still learning. Okay, so now we're at the end of the circle. I'm going to back tack to secure my stitch. I'm going to go a little bit forward again. I'm going to snip using the scissors. And there you have it. A beautiful circle. And then obviously you continue with each one. Do like 4 or 5 of these. Maybe take a week or so to practice this every day while you're doing your project on the side. It's a really good exercise to get going. Okay guys, so for our first project, we're going to be making these really cool pot plant holders or storage buckets. So you can use these for anything, for putting in your lemons or your utensils, or even a cute little plant. So I'm going to walk you through how to make these, what fabrics to use, and you'll make your first project today. So with any project that you start making, you need a pattern. So this is a really nice simple pattern. It's literally 2 squares. I've got a 30 by 30 centimeter square, which is the main pattern base. And then I've got a 7.5 by 7.5 centimeter, which is for the corners of my lining and my main fabric, to make that. When you're making a pot plant holder, you need the following fabric selection. You need 2 pieces for your outer fabric, 2 pieces for your lining, and a fusible batting. For today's project, I have selected this BullDenim for my lining, and I'm going to teach you how to cut out your pattern. Whenever you're cutting out fabric, you need to place your pattern on the grain line of the fabric. What is the grain line? The grain line is the way in which the weaves of the fabric fall. If you don't do this and you finish your project, it will sit or fall funny. I have traced out the pattern, and now I'm going to proceed to cutting it. I have cut out 2 pieces for my lining using a BullDenim. I have used this beautiful wax fabric for the outer layer, which I found lying around. Obviously with the shutdown, I don't have that much access to fabrics. I'm just using recycled bits that I have lying around. And then I have this really nice interfacing, which is a batting. I have 2 pieces of this, and I'll show you how to use this as we go further in the project process. So what is interfacing? Interfacing is used to stiffen your project. So for example, with the pot plant holder, in order to create this nice structure, I'm going to use an interfacing that has a batting in it, so then it won't just like collapse. So how to use interfacing? For this, you'll need an iron and an ironing board. You're going to take your fabric. You're going to place it facing on the ironing board, the side that is going to be facing inside. So the nice side won't be interfaced. So now this fabric has a wax, so I don't want the interfacing on the wax side. So I'm going to put it facing down on my ironing board. I'm going to place my interfacing on top. So what I've done is I've checked which side has the glue. It has these like rough bubbles on it that you'll feel. This needs to be, is the ironing part, which is the glue part. So this is going to go down on your fabric. I then have my batting side facing towards me. Taking my iron, it's a bit of an older iron, so I need a lot of steam to get this ironed on. And I need to place it on each piece for about 10 seconds. The reason being is it's quite thick, so it does take a bit of time to get it all nicely glued, and just make sure that your corners are nicely stuck down as well. So it does take a bit of time, so give yourself at least 30 minutes to get this completely right and correct. Okay, so everything is nicely glued down, all my corners are perfect. I'm going to just iron it over once flat so that there's no bubbles, and then I'm going to turn it around and iron the front part so the bubbles are removed. And then I'm going to take my pair of scissors and cut off any interfacing that is sticking out, just to make it nice and neat. I'm then going to make sure that my pattern lines up nicely on both sides. If your fabric does have a pattern, just make sure that everything is nicely in place. And then I'm going to layer it on top like that. I'm going to take my pins, and I'm going to pin the 2 sides together all the way around so that nothing is out of place when I'm sewing. I'm going to do the same with my lining, and again I'm going to pin it all closed. I've pinned both of my pieces together and left the top open. You're not going to sew the tops closed, so I haven't put pins there so you don't get confused. For my lining, I'm going to have to leave a gap which I'm going to pull all my fabrics through. I'll show you what I mean exactly. But what I'm going to do is take my chalk pencil and make a mark so that I know where I'm going to turn it and not sew over. So to begin sewing, I'm going to use this orange thread, which goes really nicely with my fabric. I'm going to start sewing the outer layer. So what I do is I always tack my corners in place. The reason being is that they need to line up really nicely when you are sewing. So what is tacking? Tacking means just placing a thread, one thread, to hold the fabric in place. You can do this by hand. I like to just do it with the sewing machine, it's easier. So I just sew a little bit, one stitch around all four corners. So I know that nothing is going to shift when I am sewing. There we go. To begin sewing, I'm going to place my sewing foot as a guide for this project. The reason being is that where my foot is placed exactly is a 0,5 seam allowance. What does this mean? Your seam allowance is where you'll actually sew your pattern. So for example, if you have a pattern that's 30 centimeters, then you will make it 31 centimeters. In our case, my pattern was 29 centimeters with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. But to make it easy for you guys to follow, I'm going to use the 0,5 centimeter seam allowance so that you can use your sewing foot as a guide, which makes sewing your first project a lot easier. To start, I'm going to back tack a few times. This creates an extra strength in the stitch, and this will not then pull when you are busy with the fabric. I'm going to go a little bit faster. You never sew over your pins, so remove your pins as you're sewing. Using your ruler and your guide to go straight all the way down. I'm now going to use my sewing foot as a guide. So what does that mean? I'm going to keep going until I'm about halfway through my sewing foot. I never lift my needle, only the sewing foot. I then lower the foot. Again, we've reached a corner, so I need to back tack to reinforce that stitch. And then I'm going to continue going at the 0,5 centimeter seam allowance, using my foot as a guide and the ruler, all the way around excepting the top. Don't forget to remove your pins. Again, I'm reaching the end of my row. I'm going to use my foot as a guide. I'm going to go like halfway, lift my foot, slowly swivel the fabric, lower my foot, go 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back to reinforce the corner, and then continue. When I've reached the top, I'm going to sew all the way to the edge, and then I'm going to back tack 3 times and go forward again. And using the cutting tool, and there's my first square completed. We are now going on to the lining. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around, excepting with this one, I'm going to leave a gap. Don't forget the gap is so that we can turn all the fabric inside out. I'm going to use orange for this part so that you can see what I've done, but usually it's best to match your fabric and your thread, so it looks smart and professional. When I've reached the gap, I'm going to back tack and go forward to reinforce the stitch there, because I'm going to be pulling a lot, so I need an extra strength. I'm going to use the cutter, and then where I've left the second mark, I'm going to lower my foot again and my needle. I'm going to go forward, back tack, then continue. Towards the edge, back tack, go forward, and use my cutter. I now have completed my lining, and I have 2 beautifully sewn squares. Okay guys, so now we're going to do our corners. So we're making square corners. So using your pattern piece, the bottom of my square, I'm going to trace it around like that. Then making a mark over here, I'm going to flip it and do the exact same thing on the opposite side, like that. Okay, so I've drawn my corners in. So there's 2 ways of doing this. First way, I'm going to pinch the corner here and on the opposite side, making a square like that. I can then pin it in place, sew it along the line, making sure that it all lines up nicely on both sides, and then cut the remaining of the fabric. The second way you can do it is cutting out the corner and then sewing. I just want to make sure it's perfect so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. Don't want to cut something off and then make it oopsie. Okay, and then same thing. You can literally, you've already now cut it, so then you can sew it beautifully across like that. So there's the 2 ways to do it. So for today's demonstration, I'm going to actually cut out the corners. I think it's just easier for when you're starting. I'm now back at the sewing machine. I've cut out my corners. I'm going to put a pin here just to reinforce it. And now I'm going to close it nicely. Okay. Again, I'm going to back tack. And sew all the way down. Don't forget to remove the pin. And what I like to do is I like to back tack over the seam, because it's also where the fabric does tend to pull. I'm going to go all the way to the end again. I'm going to back tack and go forward. Using my cutter, I then have my first square complete. Okay, so now I have completed my 4 corners. I'm now going to take the lining and flip it to face the right side. Guys, this is looking really nice. And then I'm going to place it on the inside. So the 2 nice sides need to face each other. Then, using my seams, I'm going to line them up on both sides. I'm going to push all the corners down so that everything lines up nicely. Using my pins, I'm going to first pin my seams so that they're all lining up. Pinning all the way around. Okay, I've pinned everything all the way around. My seams are nicely pinned together. I then check my corners are pushed in and neat. And then I'm going to trim my lining so that it lines up with my fabric all the way around, so it's easier to sew. Okay, as you can see, I've trimmed and I'm ready to get sewing the last bit. So on my sewing machine, I have a removable compartment here for when I'm sewing sleeves or open items like this. So I always start on the seam. Again, I'm going to use my foot as a guide. Remove the pin and start at this point, sewing all the way around. I lower my foot. Again, I back tack over here, and then I go all the way around. When I reach the next seam, I do the same thing. I back tack and I continue. When I reach the end, I back tack again. And using the cutter, I have now sewn it closed. I've now sewn completely around. I'm ready to turn it inside out. The reason why I don't do a top stitch to close it at the top here is because this is a beginner lesson. And if you aren't 100% confident in sewing and your stitches are a little bit squiff, then it is going to ruin the whole look of your completed project. So that's why I actually like to close the seam on the inside. Yeah, I'm so excited. This looks absolutely gorgeous. I'd actually love to see your projects as well. Please could you send me photos of what you guys get up to? We can all share our amazing ideas. So I have now got a beautiful storage bucket, plant holder, whatever you want to use this for. Now we have one more step to do. Okay, so now I'm going to close the open parts. I'm going to use pins to line it up neatly, and I'm going to sew all the way down. I'm going to back tack at the top to give it extra reinforcement, and just sew. Yeah, I've actually changed to black threads, and the reason being is because you'll actually see this thread. So just make sure that the color that's your lining is the same color as the thread you're using to close this, because it has to have a neat finish. And then I'm gonna go all the way down because I just feel then it's nice and strong. If you don't sew over onto your fabric here, and then I'm going to back tack at the end just to create a beautiful finish. Using my cutter, lifting my foot, I've then completely sewn it closed. And as you can see, just going to push the corners out nicely, is that you can't actually see that stitch on the inside. And then if you want, you can just pull the lining up a little bit like that. I've never used this fabric before. It's a little bit softer than the fabrics I actually normally use, but I'm recycling now with the lockdown, so it's a little bit more flimsy than the other fabrics, but it's still really pretty. And there you have it. A beautiful bucket or pot plant holder, whatever you want to use this for. Hi guys, so that's a wrap up for today. I really do hope that you managed to complete this whole project. It's such a fun way to get started with your sewing, and these make such awesome gifts. They look beautiful in your home, and it's really such a nice basic project to get started with. And I'd love to see some of your work. If you can reply with a photo, it would be so great to share on our journey together. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more channel videos. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.